The leather harness felt heavier in my hands than usual as I stood outside the familiar red brick house on Maple Street. 6 months since I'd lost my sight, and coming home still felt like navigating a minefield. But this time was different. This time, I had Atlas beside me, my golden retriever guide dog, trained for 8 months at the Pacific Institute for the Blind. His warm presence against my left leg was the only thing keeping me steady as I reached for the doorbell. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sound of footsteps approached from inside, multiple voices talking over each other. Through the thin walls, I could already hear them. My sister Janet's high-pitched complaints about her latest drama, my brother Kevin's loud opinions about everything, and underneath it all, Mom's exhausted sighs. I straightened my shoulders and pressed the doorbell, Atlas sitting perfectly at attention beside me. The door swung open, and I heard Mom's sharp intake of breath. "Oh, Marcus, you came, and you brought—" She paused, and I knew she was staring at Atlas. "You brought that thing." "His name is Atlas, Mom. He's my guide dog." I kept my voice steady, though my grip tightened on the harness handle. "I told you about him on the phone." Right. Well, come in, I suppose. But maybe leave the dog outside? You know how your father feels about animals in the house." The familiar knot formed in my stomach, the same one I'd carried since childhood whenever I didn't quite fit their idea of normal. But now it was worse. Now I couldn't see their disapproving faces, could only hear the hesitation in their voices, feel the tension in the air like a physical weight. "Atlas stays with me. That's how guide dogs work." I stepped forward, and Atlas moved with me in perfect synchronization, his training evident in every measured step. Inside, the living room felt smaller than I remembered. The furniture was exactly where it had been 6 months ago, before the accident that took my sight, but somehow everything felt different. Hostile. I found the armchair I'd always sat in, the one by the window, and settled down. Atlas positioned himself beside me, his body warm and reassuring against my leg. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Kevin's voice boomed from across the room. "And he brought a pet." "He's not a pet," I said quietly. "He's a working animal. He helps me navigate safely." Janet's laugh was sharp and uncomfortable. "Navigate? Marcus, you're sitting in Mom's living room, not climbing Mount Everest. It seems a bit dramatic, don't you think?" The words stung more than they should have. I'd prepared for this, knew they wouldn't understand immediately. But hearing it spoken out loud, the dismissal in Janet's voice, the way she said, quote, "dramatic like my blindness," was a choice I was making for attention. It cut deep. "The dog is making me nervous," Dad's voice came from his recliner, where he always held court during family gatherings. "All that panting and the hair. Can't you just use a stick like other blind people?" Other blind people. As if I had joined some club he didn't approve of. As if my disability was a lifestyle choice rather than the result of a drunk driver running a red light on a Tuesday afternoon in March. "Dad, Atlas doesn't shed much and he's perfectly trained. He won't bother anyone." I reached down to stroke Atlas's head, feeling his calm energy flowing up through my fingers. "He's been trained not to beg for food or bark or—" "I don't care what he's trained to do," Dad interrupted. "This is my house, and I don't want a dog in it. Your mother works too hard keeping this place clean to have some animal tracking mud and hair everywhere." The conversation continued around me, but I felt myself shrinking into the chair. Atlas seemed to sense my distress because he shifted slightly, pressing more firmly against my leg. Through his harness, I could feel his steady breathing, his unwavering presence. He was the most important relationship in my life now. The difference between independence and helplessness, between confidence and fear. But to my family, he was just an inconvenience. "You know what I think?" Janet's voice carried that familiar tone she used when she thought she was being helpful. "I think you're using this whole situation to get attention. First the accident, now this dog. It's like you want us to feel sorry for you." The silence that followed her words was deafening. I sat there, my hand resting on Atlas's head, feeling the weight of their judgment settling over me like a heavy blanket. 6 months of learning to navigate a world without sight, 6 months of rebuilding my life piece by piece, and they thought I was performing for sympathy. Mom cleared her throat from the kitchen doorway. Marcus, honey, maybe we could compromise? The dog could stay in the garage during dinner. It's warm out there. And we set up that old camping chair. His name is Atlas, I repeated, feeling my patience stretching thin. And guide dogs aren't supposed to be separated from their handlers. It's not how the partnership works, Kevin scoffed from somewhere near the television. Partnership? Marcus, it's a dog. You're acting like it's your business partner or something. Just tie it up outside for a few hours. It'll survive. I felt Atlas shift slightly beside me, and I wondered if he could sense the hostility in the room. During our training at the Pacific Institute, they'd prepared me for public reactions, for strangers who might not understand. But they hadn't prepared me for this. They hadn't prepared me for my own family treating my lifeline like a nuisance. You don't understand, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Atlas isn't just a pet I can leave outside. He's my mobility. Without him, I can't safely navigate unfamiliar spaces. I can't detect obstacles, curbs, traffic patterns. He's my independence. Janet's heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she paced. But you're not in an unfamiliar space, Marcus. You're in Mom and Dad's house. You grew up here. You know where everything is. I knew where everything was when I could see, I corrected. Everything feels different now. Distances, sounds, spatial relationships. I walked into the coffee table 3 times when I first came home from the hospital. Well, maybe if you practiced more instead of relying on that animal, Dad said, his newspaper rustling as he turned the page. Your grandfather went blind in the war, and he managed just fine with a cane. Didn't need some expensive dog eating special food and requiring constant attention. The comparison hit me like a physical blow. My grandfather had been Dad's hero, a man who'd lost his sight to shrapnel in Vietnam, and spent the rest of his life struggling with mobility, rarely leaving the house except for absolute necessities. Dad somehow saw that isolation as noble, as proof of character rather than tragedy. Grandpa Joe was miserable, I said quietly. He stopped going places because it was too hard. He stopped visiting friends, stopped traveling, stopped living. Is that what you want for me? I want you to stop being so dependent, Dad shot back. This whole thing with the dog, the special training, the government programs. In my day, people learned to adapt without all these accommodations. The word accommodations dripped with disdain, as if requesting basic accessibility was a character flaw. I thought about the 8 months Atlas and I had spent training together at the Institute. The countless hours learning to work as a team, building trust, developing the communication that kept me safe in a world designed for sighted people. To them, it was just government waste and personal weakness. The Pacific Institute isn't a government program, I said. It's a private organization that trains guide dogs. Atlas cost $30,000 to train. Kevin let out a low whistle. 30 grand for a dog? Jesus, Marcus, you could have bought a nice car for that money. Or, better yet, hired a driver. I didn't pay for him. The Institute covers the cost through donations. But even if I had paid, he's worth every penny. He's given me my life back. Your life back? Janet's voice rose. Marcus, your life isn't over just because you can't see. You're being dramatic again. Plenty of blind people function perfectly well without dragging around some expensive animal. I felt something crack inside my chest. Atlas sensed it too, because he stood up and nudged my hand with his nose, a gentle reminder that he was there. His training had included emotional support techniques, ways to ground his handler during moments of stress or panic. But he couldn't protect me from the words that kept coming. You know what I think happened? Janet continued, settling into what I recognized as her therapist voice, the tone she used when she thought she was being insightful. I think you've gotten comfortable being the victim. The accident was terrible, nobody's saying it wasn't. But you've turned it into this whole identity. The tragic blind brother who needs special treatment, and expensive dogs, and everyone walking on eggshells around him. The room went quiet except for the ticking of Mom's grandfather clock and Atlas's soft breathing beside me. I sat there absorbing Janet's words, feeling them settle into all the places where my own doubts lived, Had I become too dependent? Was I asking for too much? The questions I'd wrestled with during my darkest nights at the rehabilitation center came flooding back. Maybe Janet has a point, Mom said softly. Not about the victim thing, that's not what she meant. But maybe you could try being more independent. Like, for tonight, just for dinner, couldn't you leave the dog in the garage? Just to show Dad you don't need it for everything? Need him, I corrected automatically. Atlas is a him, not an it. Fine him, Mom sighed. But Marcus, you have to meet us halfway here. This is hard for all of us, seeing you like this. And having this constant reminder of the accident, this big dog taking up space and needing attention, it just makes everything more difficult. I realized then that my blindness embarrassed them. Not the fact of it, necessarily, but the visibility of it. The guide dog made it impossible to pretend everything was normal, impossible for them to maintain the fiction that nothing had really changed. Atlas was evidence of my disability, proof that their son and brother was fundamentally different now. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. Atlas immediately went into alert mode, his body stiffening slightly as he listened to the approaching footsteps. I heard multiple sets of shoes on the front porch, purposeful and professional. Who could that be? Mom muttered, moving toward the front door. We're not expecting anyone. Through the window, I could hear car doors closing in the driveway, more than one vehicle. Atlas's ears perked up, and I felt him shift into his working stance, ready to guide me if needed. His training had taught him to recognize unusual situations, and something about the atmosphere had changed. Mom opened the door, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. Oh my goodness, can I help you? Good evening, ma'am. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Chen from the Pacific Institute for the Blind. We're looking for Marcus Williams and his guide dog Atlas. We understand they're here for a family gathering. My heart stopped. Dr. Chen was the director of the entire institute, the woman who'd personally overseen Atlas's training and my integration program. What was she doing here? How did she even know where I was? I'm sorry, there must be some mistake, Mom said, her voice tight with confusion. This is a private family dinner. No mistake, ma'am. May we come in? We have some urgent matters to discuss with Mr. Williams. I heard more footsteps on the porch, and Dad's chair creaked as he stood up. What the hell is going on? Marcus, did you call these people? I didn't call anyone, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Atlas moved closer to me, sensing my confusion and rising anxiety. Doctor? Chen's voice carried the authority I remembered from our sessions. Mr. Williams, we received some concerning reports about Atlas's well-being and your current living situation. We need to conduct an immediate welfare check. Welfare check? Janet's voice was shrill. What kind of reports? Another voice joined the conversation, one I didn't recognize. I'm Agent Sarah Martinez from the State Bureau of Animal Services. We work closely with the Pacific Institute to ensure that service animals are properly cared for and not subjected to hostile environments. The room went dead silent. I could feel the weight of everyone's stares, though I couldn't see them. My family's shock was palpable, their breathing shallow and rapid. Mr. Williams, Dr. Chen continued, stepping into the living room. We understand that Atlas has been separated from you during previous visits to this residence, and that there have been attempts to house him in inappropriate conditions. Is this accurate? I felt my face burn with embarrassment and confusion. How do you know about that? The Pacific Institute has protocols in place to monitor our guide dog partnerships. We receive reports from various sources when there are concerns about the treatment of our animals or their handlers. Agent Martinez spoke up. Guide dogs are protected under federal law, Mr. Williams. Any attempt to separate a certified service animal from their handler, or to house them in substandard conditions, constitutes a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Kevin found his voice first. Wait a minute. Nobody's violating any laws here. This is a family dinner. We just suggested the dog might be more comfortable in the garage. The garage? Dr. Chen's tone carried a chill I'd never heard before. You suggested housing a $30,000 specially trained guide dog in a garage during a family gathering? Well, I mean, it's a nice garage. Mom said weakly. We have that camping chair, and it's not cold outside. Agent Martinez was taking notes on something that crackled like official paperwork. Ma'am, guide dogs are not pets that can be tucked away for convenience. They're medical equipment, essentially. Would you ask someone to leave their wheelchair in the garage during dinner? The comparison hit the room like a bomb. I heard Dad's sharp exhale, Janet's nervous laugh that died immediately, Kevin's muttered curse under his breath. Furthermore, drive. Chen continued. We've received reports that the family has been pressuring Mr. Williams to function without Atlas, suggesting that his reliance on his guide dog represents weakness or excessive dependence. This kind of psychological pressure can severely damage the handler-dog relationship and compromise both their safety and well-being. Who told you that? Dad demanded. Nobody outside this family was here. Who's been reporting on us? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Chen's pause was meaningful. The Pacific Institute has many resources, Mr. Williams. We take the welfare of our graduates very seriously. When we train a guide dog team, we maintain oversight to ensure their continued success. I realized with dawning amazement that they'd been monitoring me somehow. Not spying, exactly, but checking in. Making sure I was safe, that Atlas was being treated properly, that the partnership they'd invested so much in was being supported rather than undermined. Mr. Williams, Agent Martinez addressed me directly. Has your family attempted to pressure you into leaving Atlas behind during visits? Have they suggested that using your guide dog represents excessive dependence or weakness? The question hung in the air like smoke. I could feel my family's panic, their realization that their private opinions had somehow become public scrutiny. Atlas pressed closer to my leg, his solid presence grounding me in the moment. Yes, I said quietly. They have. The simple admission seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. I heard Mom's small gasp, Dad's sharp intake of breath, Janet's whispered, "Oh God." Dr. Chin's voice was gentle but firm. Mr. Williams, would you prefer to continue this conversation in a more supportive environment? We have a car outside, and we can discuss your options privately. Options. The word carried weight and possibility. For the first time in months, someone was offering me choices instead of ultimatums, support instead of judgment. I stood up slowly, Atlas immediately moving into position beside me. His harness handle felt solid and reassuring in my grip, a connection to something reliable in a world that had suddenly shifted beneath my feet. I think that would be best, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Marcus, wait, Mom's voice cracked with desperation. You don't need to leave. We can work this out. We're family. Dr. Chen's response was measured but firm. Mrs. Williams, family relationships should support a person's independence and well-being, not undermine them. What we've documented here today suggests a pattern of behavior that's detrimental to both Marcus and Atlas. Documented? Kevin's voice shot up an octave. What do you mean documented? Have you been spying on us? Agent Martinez cleared her throat. The Pacific Institute maintains a comprehensive support network for their graduates. This includes periodic check-ins, monitoring of the guide dog's health and behavior, and yes, investigating reports of mistreatment or inadequate support systems. But who reported us? Janet demanded. We haven't done anything wrong. We just suggested alternatives. Ma'am, suggesting that a blind person should function without their guide dog isn't offering alternatives. It's asking them to compromise their safety and independence for your comfort. Dr. Chen's voice carried the weight of years spent advocating for people like me. The reports came from multiple sources. Neighbors who witnessed Atlas being left outside during previous visits. A postal worker who observed distressed behavior from the dog when separated from Marcus. Even staff at the local grocery store who noticed Marcus struggling to navigate alone during recent trips. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. People had been watching, noticing, caring about my well-being in ways my own family apparently couldn't. Mrs. Patterson next door, who always waved when Atlas and I walked past. Tom, the mail carrier who'd started taking extra time to chat since my accident. Even Sarah at the grocery store, who'd seen me fumbling without Atlas during the visits, when my family had convinced me to leave him behind. "This is ridiculous," Dad said, but his bluster had lost its edge. "We're not criminals. We just think Marcus is too dependent on that animal." "That animal," Agent Martinez said, her tone sharp, "is a highly trained service dog worth more than most people's cars. Atlas has been trained for over 18 months in mobility guidance, obstacle detection, traffic safety, and emergency response. He's not a pet, Mr. Williams. He's sophisticated assistive technology with a heartbeat." I felt a surge of validation so strong it almost brought tears to my eyes. Someone finally understood what Atlas meant to me, what he represented. Not dependence, but freedom. Not weakness, but strength. Moreover, Dr. Chen continued, the psychological impact of constantly questioning a handler's need for their guide dog can be devastating. "Marcus, how have these interactions affected your confidence in using Atlas?" The question opened a floodgate I'd been trying to keep closed. I started second-guessing everything, I admitted. Whether I really needed him for short trips, whether I was being too dependent, whether people were judging me for having him. I left him home twice this month when I went places alone, and both times I had close calls with traffic. "Jesus Christ, Marcus," Kevin whispered. "You could have been killed." "That's exactly the point," Agent Martinez said. "When families undermine the handler-dog relationship, they're not just hurting feelings, they're creating dangerous situations." Dr. Chen moved closer, and I could smell her familiar perfume, something floral and professional that reminded me of our training sessions. "Marcus, I want you to know that every concern your family has raised tonight represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what guide-dog partnership means. You're not too dependent. You're appropriately equipped." "But surely he could learn to be more independent," Mom said, her voice small and uncertain now. "I mean, other blind people manage without dogs." "Some do," Dr. Chen acknowledged. "And some use canes or other mobility aids or choose to limit their activities. But Marcus chose guide dog mobility because it offers him the highest level of independence and safety. That choice should be supported, not questioned." Atlas shifted beside me, and I realized he'd been perfectly calm throughout this entire confrontation. While my family had been in chaos, while I'd been struggling with emotions, he'd remained steady and professional. That's what his training had given him, the ability to be my constant in an inconstant world. "The Pacific Institute has a zero-tolerance policy for families who undermine our graduates," Agent Martinez said, consulting her notes. "We've seen too many cases where family pressure resulted in abandoned partnerships, increased isolation, and in some cases, serious accidents." "What does that mean?" Janet asked, though I could hear in her voice that she was beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. "It means," Dr. Chen said, "that we're prepared to relocate Marcus to a more supportive environment if necessary. We have transitional housing, support networks, and resources to help our graduates build lives surrounded by people who understand and respect their needs." The offer hung in the air like a lifeline. A way out of the constant justification, the endless explanations, the exhausting battle to be accepted for who I was now, rather than mourned for who I'd been before. "You can't just take him away from his family," Dad protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "We're not taking anyone," Dr. Chen replied. "We're offering Marcus choices. Real choices, backed by real support. Something he apparently hasn't been getting here." I looked around the room, though I couldn't see their faces. I could feel the weight of their silence. Atlas remained perfectly positioned beside me, his breathing steady and calm, despite the tension crackling through the air. This dog, this incredible animal who had given me back my independence, deserved better than being treated like an inconvenience. And honestly, so did I. "I need some time to think," I said finally. "Dr. Chen, could we step outside for a moment?" "Of course, Marcus." Her voice was warm with understanding. "Agent Martinez and I will be right here when you're ready." As Atlas guided me toward the front door, I heard Mom's broken whisper behind me. "Marcus, please don't go. We can figure this out." Outside, the evening air was crisp and clean, Atlas led me to what I assumed was one of the Institute's vehicles, and I heard Dr. Chen open a car door. The leather seats were comfortable, and Atlas settled beside me with a soft sigh, finally able to relax after the stress of the confrontation inside. "Marcus," Dr. Chen said gently, "I want you to know that what happened in there isn't uncommon. Family adjustment to guide dog partnerships can be challenging, but what we witnessed tonight crossed several lines." "How did you know to come?" I asked, still trying to process everything that had happened. "We have a comprehensive monitoring system for our graduates," she explained. "Not surveillance, but a network of support. When multiple community members expressed concern about your well-being and Atlas's treatment, we had an obligation to investigate." Agent Martinez joined the conversation from the front seat. "The grocery store incident last week was particularly concerning. Staff reported that you seemed disoriented and unsafe, struggling to navigate without Atlas. When we cross-referenced that with reports of Atlas being left outside during family visits, we knew we needed to intervene. I thought about that day at the store, how I'd convinced myself I could handle a quick trip without Atlas, because my family had made me feel guilty about bringing him everywhere. I'd knocked over a display, bumped into 3 different people, and nearly walked into a glass door. The humiliation had been overwhelming, but I'd chalked it up to having an off day. The truth is, Dr. Chen continued, we've been watching this situation develop for weeks. Your confidence scores during our monthly check-ins have been declining. Your mobility instructor noticed you seemed hesitant during your refresher session last month. And Atlas's behavioral assessments showed signs of stress consistent with inconsistent working conditions. Atlas was stressed. The thought that my family's treatment had affected him hit me harder than anything they'd said to me personally. Guide dogs thrive on routine and clear expectations, Agent Martinez explained. When they're repeatedly separated from their handlers, or when their role is constantly questioned, it creates anxiety. Atlas has been performing his duties beautifully, but our veterinary behaviorist noticed signs of uncertainty during his last evaluation. I reached down to stroke Atlas's head, feeling guilty that I'd allowed my family's pressure to affect him. He leaned into my touch, and I realized that he'd been trying to comfort me all evening, even while dealing with his own stress. What are my options? I asked. Dr. Chen shifted in her seat. Well, ideally, we'd work with your family to educate them about guide dog partnerships. We offer family counseling sessions, educational workshops, and ongoing support to help relatives understand and embrace the handler-dog relationship. And if they're not interested in that, then we help you build a different support network. The Pacific Institute has transitional housing specifically for graduates dealing with unsupportive family situations. We also have a mentorship program that connects you with other handlers who've faced similar challenges. The idea of leaving my family permanently felt both terrifying and liberating. These people inside had raised me, shared holidays and birthdays with me, been the foundation of my life for 32 years. But they'd also spent the last 6 months making me feel ashamed of my disability and dependent on their approval for basic dignity. There's something else, Agent Martinez said quietly. The Pacific Institute is prepared to offer your family a choice. They can participate in our family education program and learn to properly support your partnership with Atlas, or they can lose access to you during your adjustment period. You can do that, Marcus. You're an adult, Dr. Chen said firmly. You have the right to surround yourself with people who support your well-being. The Institute has legal standing to protect our graduates from situations that compromise their safety or mental health. Through the car window, I could hear raised voices from inside the house. My family was arguing among themselves, probably trying to figure out how this had spiraled so far out of their control. Part of me felt sorry for them, but a larger part felt relief that someone finally understood what I'd been going through. What would the education program involve? I asked. 8 weeks of sessions covering guide dog training, disability rights, proper etiquette around working animals, and family communication strategies, Dr. Chen explained. It's not punishment, Marcus. It's education. Most families who complete the program develop much healthier relationships with our graduates. And if they refuse, then you'll know where you stand, and we'll help you build a life surrounded by people who celebrate your independence rather than undermine it. The front door of the house opened, and I heard footsteps approaching the car. Atlas's ears perked up, but he remained calm and professional. Marcus? It was Mom's voice, shaky and uncertain. Can we talk? Dr. Chen lowered the car window. Mrs. Williams, we've just finished explaining Marcus's options to him. He needs time to make his decision without pressure. I just want to say that we love him, Mom said, and I could hear tears in her voice. We never meant to hurt anyone. We just didn't understand. Love isn't enough, Agent Martinez said, not unkindly. Love without understanding can be more harmful than indifference. Marcus needs support, not just affection. I heard Dad's heavier footsteps approaching. What do we need to do? He asked, his voice stripped of its earlier bluster. To fix this, I mean. What do we need to do? Dr. Chen looked at me, waiting for my response. Atlas shifted beside me, his warm presence a reminder of everything I'd gained since losing my sight. Independence, confidence, freedom to move through the world safely. I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me again, family or otherwise. You need to respect my choices, I said finally. You need to understand that Atlas isn't optional. He's essential. And you need to stop treating my disability like a character flaw that needs to be overcome. We can do that, Janet's voice joined from the porch. Marcus, we want to learn. We want to do better. Doctor, Chen handed me a card, placing it directly in my palm. This has all our contact information. Take tonight to think about what you want to do. We can start the family education program as early as next week, or we can begin transitioning you to alternative support systems. The choice is entirely yours. I stood up from the car, Atlas immediately moving into position beside me. For the first time in months, I felt truly supported, not just by Atlas, whose training and loyalty had never wavered, but by an entire organization that understood what we meant to each other. I'll call you tomorrow, I told Dr. Chen. Thank you for coming. Thank you for caring enough to check on us. As the Institute's vehicles pulled away, I stood in my parents' driveway with Atlas beside me. My family gathered uncertainly on the porch behind me. The evening air carried the promise of change, and for the first time since my accident, I felt excited about what came next. 6 months later, my family completed the Pacific Institute's education program with flying colors. They learned to see Atlas as the professional partner he was, stopped questioning my need for him, and began advocating for accessibility in their own communities. But more importantly, I learned that real family supports your independence, not your dependence on them. Atlas and I still visit for Sunday dinners, but now he's welcomed with the respect he deserves. And when new graduates ask me about dealing with unsupportive families, I tell them what Dr. Chen taught me that night. You don't have to choose between your independence and your relationships, but you do have to choose people who choose you back. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.